everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. Well, today I have my second story time for you. I will be talking about my ordeal with my fifth miscarriage because it really taught me a lot, and that's what I want to share. And I went through emotional things with the doctors and just everything, but I did learn something, you know, and I want to share that with you guys. I'm not here to bash any doctors at all. I'm not here to do that. That's not my intention in this video. That's what I wanted to share, my experience with my miscarriage. Please ask any questions. If I did not address anything in my story time that you'll be seeing right now, just ask me anything and I will address it in part 2, because this is going to be hopefully only 2 parts, but maybe 3. I'm not sure. Okay guys, so I will let you see my story time and my ordeal with my 5th miscarriage. Okay. This miscarriage that I'm going to talk about was my last and my 5th, and I was around 31 years old when it happened. When I decided to have or try to get pregnant, you know, after having 4 miscarriages, I realized that this was a very, very strong possibility that I would have another one. So I wanted to go to a doctor, my doctor, and find out if there was anything new they can tell me, if there was any test they can do or anything like that. I belong to a medical group, so there were about 4 OBGYNs that I could have seen in the same building, in the same, you know, area. So when I called to make the appointment, they set me up with this particular doctor, and I even asked, you know, honestly, I asked if he was, you know, a good doctor, and they were like, well, he is new to the practice. But I thought, okay. So I went for my appointment. I went in, and he was a very, very young doctor, very young doctor. Good looking doctor too, I'm not gonna lie. But I went in there and, you know, I answered all kind of questions on the forms and stuff like that, and he says, well, what seems to be the problem? And I told him that I have no problem getting pregnant, that's not the issue. The issue with me is that I lose I lose my babies within the first trimester. And he said, oh, you've had 4 miscarriages. And he looked at me and he told me, well, that's not really a problem. That's really not an issue. And I said, you don't think 4 miscarriages is something like a red flag, or that there could be something wrong with me? And he said, no, 4 miscarriages is basically normal. And I thought, wow. And then he asked me, you know, well, you have a child. I said, yes, I do. I have one. It was my oldest with my previous marriage. And with my husband now, I've had 2. So I've had 3 with my first marriage, and I have 2 with my husband now. And so when I had the 4th miscarriage, which was with my husband now, I knew that the issue was not them, but it was me. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, I'm not wise to these things. I'm not a doctor, but, you know, I'm piecing things together, and I'm 30 years old, 31 years old, and I'm just sort of, you know, anyways. So, and I told him that I've had 3 miscarriages with my first husband, 1 live birth, and now with my husband, we would like to try to have a baby, but, you know, I just want to know if there's any testing. Okay. Basically, he told me that I was depressed, that's all that it was, depression. And I could feel myself starting to boil. I could feel that I wanted to run out of that room. I felt dumb. I really, really did. Because he made me feel that way by telling me, first of all, I don't have an issue, and the issue is in my head. That's what he said to me. And man, oh man, you know, I'm young, And, you know, you think, you know, he's the doctor. He must know everything. You know, he knows better than me. But in that moment, I got ticked. He told me that I needed to go to counseling to deal with the depression. And I said to him, that's when I said to him, you know what? If I was so depressed, and if I am so depressed, I would not be here taking a proactive approach to all of this. I also said to him, I had been about 4 years in counseling the first time and 2 years when I went back. And I did deal with these issues among other issues. And he just stood there looking at me. I don't think he liked that. I think that honestly, it rubbed his ego the wrong way, I think, because his next words to me was, well, I'm going to go ahead and humor you and run some tests. That's what he said to me. And I tell you what, guys, I wanted to leave so bad. I wanted out. I remember that. All right, so that basically was, I mean, there was more, but that basically was my visit to him the first time. He ran some blood work. He did a pap smear and he ran some blood work. The blood work had to be done at a specific time during my cycle. When I got the results back of that, it was determined that I had what was luteal phase. Everybody goes through a luteal phase, and mine was extremely short, causing my uterus not to develop progesterone, or my uterus to not develop progesterone to thicken up the uterus enough to hold the babies. Okay, the glue, the sticky substance. That was what he told me. And I said, and I felt the weight of the world just like go off. And I thought, is this fixable? Can I be fixed? Can I not ever have another miscarriage? This was going on in my head. And he told me, this is exactly what he told me. He said, you have what they call luteal phase. You need progesterone, but I don't know how to exactly when to take when you should take it or anything. I need to consult my colleagues. That's what he said to me. No, he says, is you're going to take this progesterone, what was it, the day after ovulation, and it has to be the day after. I said, so should I try this month? Because see, for me, I don't have a problem getting pregnant. I get pregnant the first try. It was always, and I'm not being funny, this is the truth. I get pregnant the first try. And he says, yeah, he says, go ahead, you know, I'll have the progesterone ready with all the whatever. Okay, well, ovulation came the next day, you know, and I kept calling the office. I kept asking where, you know, I don't have my progesterone. He was supposed to call it in. He was supposed to give me the instructions. He said I had to take it the day after ovulation. I've done all that, you know, I've done ovulated. And the office was like, oh, okay, I'll let Dr. So-and-so know. I'll let Dr. So-and-so know. Guys, I took a pregnancy test. I was pregnant. I still had no progesterone. Finally, I called. I said, I just took a pregnancy test. I don't have the progesterone. Blah, 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 blah. They're like, okay. Finally, they called it in to my local pharmacy. I went, I picked it up. I called them back. I said, what do I do? You know, it's been, you know, they're like, they're suppositories. They're vaginal suppositories. They told me how to take it, whatever. And I right away when I got him, okay. They said the doctor wants to see you in such and such time. I said, no, I'm not going back to him. Can I see another doctor? Because like I said, they're all in that little office. They said, yes, okay, we'll put you in with this doctor. I went in, okay, he did a pregnancy test. He says, yep, you sure are pregnant. He said, he saw the records and everything, and he says, what are you taking? I said, suppository progesterones. He says, oh, no, 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 we don't want that. He explained to me that he was a pharmacist and this was his specialty, and that a lot of doctors at that time, guys, I'm 49. I turned 49 yesterday. But at that time, I don't know what is said now, but at that time when I was 31 years old, a lot of doctors really weren't on the bandwagon with the whole progesterone luteal thing. He says, but I am a true believer in it. He says, but not suppositories. You need to be on pills and you need to be on this amount of progesterone. He proceeded to leave the office. He says, I'll be right back. He left the office, guys. He comes back with boxes of progesterone. I said, where did you get these? He goes, oh, we have some here, and I need you to start taking these right away. And he went and got me some water, and literally I had to take one there. They are in the same office. Dr. So-and-so is in the same office. I'll call him Dr. M, was my first doctor. Dr. C was my second doctor. In the same, they walk the same hallway. They have the same cabinet. It's in the hallway. That's where he pulls all the progesterone from. And yet I waited and waited for them to call for some suppositories because he didn't know exactly how to give them to me and any of that. Dr. C had told me, okay, I'm going to see you every 3 days, and we're going to take blood work every 3 days to make sure that your progesterone is where it needs to be and that it's starting to go up. I said, oh, okay. I felt so amazing. I felt like I was being taken care of. So that day, like I said, he gave me my first pill right there in the office. I went home, was taking the pills, and then one day I remember my son had a dentist appointment, and that day I felt awful. I felt like my stomach was a rock. It was hard, like a rock. I've never felt that. But we drove about 20-25 minutes to my son's dentist appointment. I actually ended up calling my ex-husband, and I said, you know what, is there any way you can take over the appointment, because I don't feel good. I don't know what's going on, but I don't feel good. He said, yeah, no problem. So I went to the dentist appointment, met my ex-husband, he took over, and I was just kind of walking and walking because my stomach felt like I just had this big gas bubble, you know, and it was hard. My husband says, you know, I'll bring you something to eat. I said, no, I don't really want to eat. I don't feel good. I just didn't feel good. Around 7 o'clock, I got up and I bled out. I knew what it was. I knew what happened. I knew what was happening. I literally sat on the toilet from about 7:30 to 11 p.m. And I won't get into that because it'll be a long video, but if you want to know a little bit more details upon this story, I can. Just ask all the questions you want. I don't have a problem with answering anything. I can do a separate video. But I was there that long of a time. About 11 o'clock in the evening, my mom comes because she came because I knew I was going to have to go to the hospital. My mom comes to watch my son, and around 11:30 we headed off to the hospital. I never had a miscarriage like this before, and so basically though what happened this time around was that the sac stayed behind. The baby was expelled and the sac stayed behind. Now guys, I know I call it a baby and maybe some of you don't agree, and that's okay. I'm just telling you my story, okay? That's all. That's why my body was supplying all of that blood still, because it thought it was still pregnant because of the sac, but it was an empty sac. So they said, we're gonna have to keep you overnight. You have lost a lot of blood. I was actually pretty pale by then. And so I said, okay. they said, we're going to have to do a D&C on you. And the doctor on call will be here in a little bit. Now, this was about 1 o'clock in the morning at this point. They even had blood on hold because they thought my hemoglobins were going too low. And when I was laying in the bed, the doctor on call walks in, and it's Dr. M. And he recognizes me because, like I said, he was my first doctor. And you could have seen his face, his expression went like, oh, I mean, and I looked at him like, really, you know, it had to be him. And I think for a reason, and I'll get into that in a minute. But he comes up to me and he grabs my hand, and I looked at him, and I wasn't trying to be rude, but I had so much emotion, you know, when I saw him. And I looked at him and I said, but I don't have a problem, do I? Because he was the one that told me I didn't have the problem. It was all in my head. And after that, he just, he put his head down, honestly, and he goes, I'll be right back. He went out, he came back in with a clipboard with a piece of paper and pencil, and he drew out exactly what he was going to do. He said, I'm going to try not to touch the uterine wall. I'm going to try and scrape the sac out without, you know, he was very delicate. He was very expressive. He told me everything he would do. He says, I'm trying not to touch the uterine wall, because the less you mess with the uterus, the better for if you want to try to have a baby again. So he says, I'm going to be very, very, very careful. They performed the D&C around 6 o'clock in the morning. He came in, they took me in, and after, when he came back, he was such a different doctor when he came back. He was very, very compassionate. He was very compassionate, very compassionate. And I look back at that moment, and I really think that it had to be him, because I'm hoping that from that moment on, he no longer said to any other woman what he said to me. Do you know what I mean? And I think God works in these ways, you know, that's what I believe in. And I believe that he was the one there for a reason. Truly. He was a brand new doctor. You know, I don't know. I know I was the first patient that had to do with these types of issues for him. So anyways, he told me to make an appointment with my doctor, and of course he knew who Dr. C was, and in fact he talked highly of Dr. C, and he said, you're in good hands with him if you should want to try again to have another, you know, try again to have a baby. And I said, thank you. And that was that. I lost the baby in November 1st of 2000. That's when I lost the baby. And I went in, and this was like November 4th, I believe. And he was like, how do you feel being pregnant? And I said, you know, I told him I lost the baby, and he felt really, really bad. We discussed a lot of things. I cried, of course. I cried. I asked him, does he think that the lack of the proper progesterone caused, and of course caused the miscarriage, you know, the lack of not having it right after I ovulated, and then having it when I found out I was pregnant, and then it being the wrong, you know, dose, and, you know, everything like that. And of course, I think he doesn't want to talk bad about his colleague. So they have this sort of, you know, they're very careful with their words, especially from another colleague. But he was just very sort of, we can try again. That's what he kept saying. We can, it's up to you, but we can try again. One thing that I'm so glad that I did think about was the day that I saw Dr. C and he gave me my pill, you know, my very first visit with him. This was actually my very second visit with him. So I asked him if he could tell me what my progesterone's level were when I went to go see him. And he said, sure. And he told me they were a 10. And as far as how far pregnant I was, I should have been at least a 20, 21. And I was a 10. So that kind of confirmed to me that, oh, I do have an issue with making progesterone in my uterus. So I'll leave it at that. That was that. A lot more came after, not with the doctor, but emotionally with people around me, with support group, with my sort of depression, and how these 3 munchkins came to be right after, and how they came to be. There was a lot, you know, there was a lot, because I had 5 miscarriages. I had a serious problem. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. I'll do part 2 and talk about the other things. If you have any questions that you guys want me to answer in part 2, please do so. Please ask. And I apologize that this is long, but I don't think I'll be able to do these types of videos in such a short amount of time. I apologize. You know, maybe some might, but some like these, there'll be different parts to them. What I have to say about this particular story time at part 1 is be your own advocate when it comes to seeing a doctor, seeing a lawyer, seeing a professional. You know, if you don't feel it's right and you don't feel you're being heard, be respectful, but make your point. You know, a lot of times we look at doctors or we look at professionals, and because we don't know anything, you know, we're going in there maybe emotionally charged or whatever, we just take their word all the time, but yet we feel something wrong in here. We don't feel like we were heard, or we don't feel that things went well. And that's what happened with me. But I'm so happy that I did speak out. And I was upset when I saw Dr. M walk into the room at the hospital. But then afterwards, I knew it was meant to be that way. You know, anything you want to ask, if you know, I might have missed something, or you're curious about something, leave it down below for me, please, and I will definitely address it in part 2. Okay, my friends, sorry about this being long. This is going to be about 25 minutes long. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. All right, I will see you guys in part 2.